In this film, Necip Fazıl Kısakürek is at your age. Do you want to be friends with him? Friends, my name is Necip Fazıl Kısakürek. I'm a Turkish poet, writer and intellectual. Would you like to know me better? I was born in 1904 in Istanbul. I spent my childhood in the mansion of my grandfather, Mehmet Hilmi Bey, one of the famous judges of the time in Çemberlitaş. I learned to read from my grandfather at the age of 5, but it was my grandmother, Zafer Hanım, who gave me the pleasure of reading. I loved my grandfather very much. He was both my grandfather and my first teacher. I was his shadow. He also liked me very much, found me very intelligent and said that I had a light. My education life was spent in many different schools. I started my primary education in the neighborhood school. Then I entered the French Frere School in Gedikpaşa. After a while, I left this school and enrolled in the American college. We moved to Heybeliada when I was 8 years old. There, I went to Heybeliada Numune School and completed my primary education here. Later on, I entered the Naval Academy, the Mektebi Fünûn Bahriye Şahane. I was interested in poetry when I was a student here. Among my teachers were names such as Yahya Kemal and Hamdullah Subhi. My interest in poetry increased, and I published a weekly magazine called Nihal. Since I learned English well at school, I had the opportunity to read the works of the great English writers of that period in their own language. I started my higher education at Darülfünun Faculty of Law in 1921. Then I entered the Department of Philosophy of the Literature Madrasa. In this school, I met many famous literature men such as Ahmet Hashim and Yakup Kadri. I entered Sorbonne University in Paris, Department of Philosophy, with the scholarship I received after working hard. However, I soon returned to my country, and my first book of poetry, Örümcek Ağı, was published in 1925. In those years, I worked in a new profession, banking. I first worked at the Dutch Bahri Sefit Bank and various branches of the Ottoman Bank, and then at the Ankara branch of İşbank. My tenure here lasted for about 9 years, and eventually I was promoted to be an inspector. After the publication of my second poetry book, Kaldırımlar, at the age of 24, I became a well-known poet. I was among the leading names of Baba Ali, which was the center of the Turkish press at that time. I met Abdülhakim Arvasi, who was a great religious man in those years. Thanks to his lessons I learned from him, both my ideas and my life have changed. I was very impressed by a conversation I heard from him. I wrote down the questions I wanted to ask on a piece of paper and asked him one by one. I was so impressed by the answers he gave me that I reviewed all the poems I had written. In most of my works, it is possible to see my life adventure and the changes in my world of thought. In the same period, I wrote my theatre play called Tohum. This play, in which I mentioned the importance of Islam and Turkishness, was staged at Istanbul City Theatres. My play, Bir Adam Yaratmak, is one of the notable plays of Turkish theatre. Between 1939 and 1943, I lectured at the Ankara Faculty of Language, History and Geography State Conservatory, and at the Istanbul Fine Arts Academy. I have been a writer and publisher. I'm a poet who made his views known to the public through Büyük Doğu magazine, which was published for a long time and was given a synonym for the Great Eastern Movement. In my theatre plays, I mostly dealt with human issues. In my memoirs, articles and studies, I mostly dealt with religious and political issues. I was selected as the Intellectual and Artistic Man of the Year, with my work titled Western Contemplation and Islamic Sufism, published in 1982. It was thanks to my mother that I became a poet. One day my mother fell ill and was hospitalized. I also went to visit. In my mother's bed, on the wide bedspread, was a small old black covered notebook. I asked my mother about the notebook. She said that the notebook contains the poems of the young girl with tuberculosis lying next to her. Then she looked at me in the eyes and said, "How I wish you were a poet." My mother's wish seemed to me to be something I nurtured in me that I did not realize until I was 12 years old. With my eyes on the window of the hospital room, against the blowing snow and howling wind, I made my decision that day and said to myself, I will be a poet. I cried. Such was my story. Found out what you want the most and shaped your life accordingly. Remember, you can achieve whatever you want. The more you achieve, the happier you will be.